Today on Voice of the Valleys, ladies and gentlemen, as the news comes in that the UK government wants to now implement a parallel legal system in the form of endorsing Sharia courts, we're also going to look at the reality of the Great Replacement that has been laid bare in a graph that's recently been circulating on social media. Not to mention, in Dearborn, Michigan, the Go Away Unfaithful meme has been fulfilled in reality. And we're also going to look at the disturbing news of two illegal immigrants trying to break into a school in Epping. Fair to say this community is probably fit to explode. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood, far-right thug, purely satirical, of course, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all doing well, because we know, obviously now the government and all the other figures in the media, in the Western world, in Europe, in all other areas, in Britain especially, are trying to now anybody that has vague concerns about their country and their people and their faith and the reverse colonization that we're seeing is being lambasted as far right. Doesn't matter if you have the most, minute concerns even. Doesn't matter if you have the most minute concerns. You're going to be lambasted as the evil far-right Nazi that you, frankly, likely are not. And obviously that was the impetus for taking Charlie Kirk's life recently. So, getting straight into it today, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to show you this, frankly, terrifying graph which has been making the rounds from the UK Office of National Statistics at the moment, which really highlights the replacement that has taken place as a concerted effort, really looking at over the last 5 or so years. But when you look at this graph, ladies and gentlemen, it's UK net migration by nationality. It goes all the way back to 2012. And it shows net migration. So when you see bars going up over the line of zero, it means there's net positive migration. If you were to see average bars going down, then that means there's net emigration. And it splits it into EU, non-EU, and British categories. I'm just going to bring this up on screen for you in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully it'll work. And I just want you to have a look at this image, which is going to be coming on screen any moment. Coming on screen now. Let me know what you see. Let me know what you see, ladies and gentlemen, particularly on the right-hand side of the graph. So if you are listening, ladies and gentlemen, and not watching, you're looking at the graph, and across all of the years from 2012 up until about June 2020, thereabouts, so March 2020, it's roughly around there. You're seeing a steady influx of predominantly EU people from the EU. Now, one thing to note, however, that is still of concern is the fact that there's still a lot of British people leaving year on year. There's net negative British emigration year on year, all the way going back from 2012 onwards. It's a very concerning thing. But once you get to that point, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see on the screen, it goes absolutely insane. It goes absolutely insane. So apologies if you see me looking down. Obviously, I'm looking down at this on my laptop. From that point onwards, it just shoots up, and you're looking at non-EU. So think of the Middle East, think of India, think of all of these other places that are outside of the EU, right? You've got Russia, you've got all of these other nations, right? It has absolutely skyrocketed. So whereas the predominant source of migration before would have been from the EU, which at least you could say we are relatively close to in terms of our ethnic breakdown, right? In terms of our ethnicity, now you wonder why things look so different in the modern days, because they have literally ramped up migration from all of these other areas of the world. You wonder why London and major cities look the way they are and have changed the way they are. This is why. This is why. You got to think, these people who are coming here from other areas of the world, they're not going to be leaving faith behind. They're not going to be leaving their customs behind or anything like that. And when you bring them in large enough number, there's not even the, outnumbering, not that we should necessarily be thinking about it in this way, but you know, the number one thing that you really have if you want to enforce your will on somebody as a group, as a tribe versus tribe, say, is number. When they get to a high enough number, not only do they not have any reason to adopt our customs, but they can then very easily, for the most part, enforce their customs on us. And that's what we've seen. So we've seen with the fact that now we have 85, I believe it is, 85 Sharia courts in this country, where, again, it's a parallel legal system. It's a parallel legal system. People always say that it's not two-tier. We literally have two parallel legal systems in this country. For one set of people, you have one legal system. For another set of people, you have another. Which you cannot have a cohesive society. Don't have a society unless you have everybody cohering around a common set of morals, a common set of principles which you make laws out of. The minute you diverge from that, the minute especially you introduce a parallel system to that, of course you're going to get conflict. Because what if the one side is being treated more leniently for the same crimes that you would get tried under if you're different, if you're of a different ethnicity under the other legal system? Again, we often see that the penalties for these things, especially with the Sharia law, is a lot more barbaric than anything we would go for. You know, you have instances where rulings in Pakistan for when a family member has been raped. If, say, your sister gets raped, it's not just a case of the rapist goes to prison. No, the sentence is that the rapist sister has to get raped by you. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking here, ladies and gentlemen. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking here. We're talking going back to the fucking 6th century here. And we're going to pretend as there's nothing wrong. We're going to pretend as there's nothing wrong. But we have to remember is that to a certain extent, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be concerned about the ethnic breakdown of these things purely because humans are naturally tribal. Humans are naturally tribal and sectarian. You saw in the case of, at least in my opinion, the Ricky Jones trial. The Ricky Jones trial where I think it was relatively clear based on the demographic breakdown of the area where the trial was held. There's a very good chance we basically saw the equivalent of the O.J. Simpson trial. Obviously, nobody was actually murdered, but there was threats to murder, and it was all on camera. The evidence all pointed to it, but the jury said that he was not guilty anyway, and he got off scot-free. Despite the fact that his crime was literally on video. So see, now this is something that if you're a native British person, I'm sorry, I know this may offend your liberal sensibilities and all the rest of it, you do need to wake up to this because it is going to affect you. You'll start shouting at me all of these things, you racist, you this, you that. It won't matter because it will come for you soon. Because they see you in the same way. In fact, they see you as something akin to a useful idiot, as I'll show you a little bit later on, how I believe he goes by the name Imam for Peace. Now, later on in the show, we'll go through a video. He's talking with Dinesh D'Souza, and he says about how he'll use particularly the left. He would always vote left when he was a radical Islamist because it would enable those kinds of activities, right? Because the left will cheer these things on. In fact, we got to stop using the term. One of the things I was watching recently that really made me realize we got to stop using the term in the way that we do left and right is because the things that are being brought in under the left banner are just pure insanity and disgusting things, right? Instead of calling them pedophiles, call them minor attracted persons, ethnic replacement, all of these other things. It's not legitimate in any way, but by calling them the left, we kind of legitimize them to a certain extent. Like, if you imagine there's this political spectrum, there's this straight line, if you will, and on the one side you have the right, which is just like the, moral goods and how everyone, the ideals of how things should be. In the middle then, the center, the perfect center point where you basically don't believe anything, it's just pure nihilism, essentially. And then everything to the left is going further and further to the opposite of the good, basically. It's one way you could sort of think about it in the way that it's manifested nowadays. Again, I suppose in the way it manifests kind of sometimes as a horseshoe. A lot of things, both sides tend to love socialism when they are the ones that get to be wielding the socialist sword, should we say. But again, Raymond Ibrahim was a great person to explain this. I was watching one of his videos, and it's like, we need to stop using the term like leftist and left because it legitimizes them. It almost gives them a seat at the table where they don't even belong, right? Because a lot of the things we're dealing with ideas and people, when you like the thing that Charlie Kirk exposed, the reason why again they couldn't contend with his ideas, they were exposing in a way how immature and how poorly thought out and how really bad their ideas were, and would expose them in many ways for the children that they were, because they had been indoctrinated. It wasn't necessarily any fault of their own. They'd been indoctrinated into these things, and their developmental processes had been deliberately stunted because they don't actually want good thinking individuals that can think for themselves. No, the people who are running institutions, etc., just want good little worker robots that toe the line. So it's not necessarily their fault, but it exposed them for the immature, childlike process that they have. Which when you saw people crashing out, when you saw people just throwing names and actually throwing things at Charlie, it's exactly the way that a child would react. And a child, you don't give them a seat at the adult table, you make them sit at the kiddie table. So maybe we should stop using the term leftist and left to delegitimize these people. That's maybe something that we should do as well. Because they enable things like this. This is what they enable, right? I'm just going to have a coffee at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't judge me for this. Yes, it was bought for me, and yes, it does say best dog dad ever on it. Don't judge me for it. Anyway, judge me. I don't care. Judge me for it. The coffee tastes great. That's all I care about. Anyway, this recently broke. Very terrifying news in Epping, which is a community that is really already fit to blow, at least from what I can see. It's ready to detonate because of the ruling, not the super injunction, that's the Afghan thing, the overruling of the verdict, where they said that this asylum seekers could stay in the hotel, even though there was an appeal from Epping Council to have the asylum seekers removed. They were successful for a while, and then the courts came in and overruled them. Well, what happened recently, ladies and gentlemen, is according to Sarah White, I believe was the first person to break this news. And according to some, there has been I just realized I got the same image twice, but there is a more blown up image, which I'll show you in a moment. Two, as far as I know, illegal immigrants, which presumably we can imagine possibly being housed at the hotel. I don't know for certain at the moment of this recording, ladies and gentlemen. You might see by the time this episode goes out a little editor's note down the bottom at the moment if more information has come to light. They climbed over the fence of a school and were wandering freely around the school grounds. Sarah reports, a school should be one of the safest environments for children, yet this incident highlights a serious failure to prioritise their security. The government must act with urgency. What will it take for them to listen? So she posted then some WhatsApp chats, which I believe were possibly with a pupil of the school. This is it's from Davenant, I believe it's called, or Davenant. I'm not sure how to really say that, but it's a town close to Epping. I should clarify that. There's WhatsApp chat, which will be coming up on screen for you in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. There's two I want to show you. It says that 2 immigrants broke into my school, had to give police statements. Me and my mates were the only ones who saw them hop the fence and reported it. One got arrested. This will make news. You can see the photo there, ladies and gentlemen. I'll blow that up a little bit more on screen for you in a moment because there's a bigger image to show the actual person that was arrested, it seems. The person then responded, what the fuck was they doing? This was right after break time. They were staring at kids. Break ended and one hopped the fence. The other watched him. I went looking for him and then reported it. No one in my school knows. Only me, my mates, and the teachers. So imagine, especially with the news now that parents are being informed if they live near these hotels. By the way, according to the Women's Safety Institute, ladies and gentlemen, apparently there's 1,500 of these hotels near schools up and down the country. 1,500 of these hotels near schools with our children. It's horrifying. I kind of lost my train of thought for a moment there, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely horrifying. And now parents are sending children home and telling them not to go down certain ways and sending letters home to the parents, letting them know not to let their child walk home certain ways that they've been advised not to. Always a tacit admittance of the problem, but nobody wants to actually come out and say it, seemingly. Because, again, you can imagine the teachers, if they're not all, up with the for lack of a better term, although I just went on about delegitimizing it a minute ago, leftist agenda. A lot of these people tend to naturally go very far to that end of the spectrum, the liberal end of the spectrum, so they've enabled a lot of this. And, you know, the unions have a lot of power. The unions have a lot of power to stop people from speaking out about it. You know, if you speak out about it, they'll just get you fired and they'll bring in somebody else, you know, because there's always going to be demand. People are just expendable nowadays. It's one thing with mass migration as well. It's made people as a resource, if you will, because again, the supply and demand with people for employment and jobs and stuff like that, it's made people completely expendable. If you don't toe the line, they can get a replacement for you probably by the end of that day. So again, what do you have to gain from taking this stand when, you know, your employer or the union or whatever it is doesn't really stand to lose anything? That's how powerful these institutions are. But here's the blown up image of the person, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the guy that hopped over the fence and was, you know, on the school grounds, presumably, if, again, pattern recognition being the essential survival skill that it is, and assume that they did not have good intentions in mind. And as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, not exactly of us as a people. Again, just further pouring petrol on the fire. We'll see what the government comes out and says if it makes the way to the Commons. Again, it'll probably just be more lectures on, you know, not stigmatizing people, not, you know, refugees welcome, all of that stuff. We want to make Wales and we want to make Britain a nation of sanctuary. And it's just going to succeed then in pouring even more petrol on that fire again. The people who are doing this stuff, the actual quote-unquote asylum seekers or illegal migrants themselves, illegal aliens themselves, are doing more than enough to pour petrol and put kindling on their own pyre. And then the government is just going to come along and ramp it up all the more. And we remember that because it's going to burn our communities all down with it. They're burning our communities all down with it by adding all of this fire on when they should be putting the fire out. You know, they should be putting the fire out and stopping this problem from proliferating. But obviously, we know that's not what they want to do. It's not what they want to do because they don't want to get rid of their voting bloc. Make no mistake, that's what they see them as, ladies and gentlemen. That's why Davey, as we'll get onto in a moment, recently come out and said that he would have the right to work. In his opinion, they should have the right to work whilst they are waiting for their claim to go through. If you think that by giving them then the right to work, they're not going to give them the right to vote, you would be very, very naive indeed. Trying to outvote you, they're trying to replace you because they know that you will not vote for the establishment because you're actually differently wired. Maybe you're a bit more entrepreneurial minded, you want to go own a business, you want to create jobs in your community because you want to get it out of the socialist disgusting funk that it's in. And you know, the government doesn't want that. They don't want, you know, private business or anything like that. They want everything to be state-owned. They want everyone to be suffering in misery the same way so that they can have all of the luxuries to themselves, all the while scraping all of your money and everything in the form of, you know, taxes, both covert and overt. All the more to your, again, equity equalizes downward, ladies and gentlemen, is a good way to think about it. Or in this instance, equality, if you will, because the British government uses the term interchangeably in this instance. Equality or equity would be a more accurate term, equalizes downward. Equalizes from the top, the government, downwards. So we all suffer together. We'll all be equally poor. But at least there'll be no, again, private business rich people to inspire the next generation to want to follow in their footsteps to build their communities up from the ashes that have been created by successive tyrannical governments. No, we can't have that, of course. There's also been video, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure where exactly this is from, of a driver that has now crashed into a school. So not just they're in danger of these people, and I say this, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe you can actually see a little bit about who the person is again, and I would be confident to say, based on what I can see, that it is what you might say is one of the usual suspects. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Right? It's hard to see, but you can see just enough, in my opinion. Drives into a school, crashes into a school, tries to flee the scene, could have got children killed. You makes you wonder, a lot of these people, now they're being granted licenses to drive, what experience do they have driving on our roads? Right, you know the rigorous learning process you have to undergo to pass your test, to earn your license and everything like that. Are we going to assume that they've done the same? Probably not. So again, here you go. This is where, again, it could have very well, in this instance, been, ladies and gentlemen, that, you know, a child had gotten killed if they happened to have been outside the school. I'm bringing the video up on screen for you in a moment. Here we go.
Yo! This just happened in front of... Oh, my. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
So I do believe in the video, ladies and gentlemen, it happens quite quickly. I do believe you can see just enough, just before he disappears behind the police car. This is a case where it's almost like it's perfectly positioned. The police car is perfectly positioned for where the takedown happens. It's truly, if I didn't know any better, you know, I think that this was scripted in order to hide it. But you can see when the takedown happens, you know, as the camera is zooming in, you can see some clues about the suspect, if you will. You can see some clues about the driver that would clue you into to understanding that maybe, again, not exactly from here, should we say. And again, it's just one in many patterns now, it seems. I will correct the record if I'm wrong on this, ladies and gentlemen. It is difficult to see, but I don't think that I'm wrong. It could be some kind of, you know, cap, or if he's got some kind of garment that's covering the head. Basically, you can see the head, and you can see what appears to at least be, obviously he's covered by all his clothing, but you can appear to see his hand as he's coming down. His hand comes up over the bonnet, and you can just about see it. So again, gives you some clues as to where, say, this person may be from, but I might be wrong. Might be wearing gloves, might have something covering, who knows. I will correct the record if that is the case. But as I said, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get called, even if you're the most moderate, centre-right, if you will, figure, right? Like Charlie Kirk, for example. You're going to get called all the evil names, the fascists, all of these things. I'm just making sure that I unmuted my microphone because I made that mistake yesterday. Charlie Kirk was on Tucker Carlson's show. This was a clip that came up on my X feed a little while ago. He was on Tucker Carlson's show, I believe not too long before he was assassinated, which was literally a week ago today. And these are the remarks that he had to say, and I want you to listen to this and say, how can you say that this is just not true in the objective sense of the word, not just in you don't like it, so you don't want it to be true or anything like that. In the case of what Charlie said here, he says he doesn't beat around the bush with his words, you know, for people that call him, you know, moderate and quite milquetoast and things like that. He doesn't beat around the words of what he says here about London and about how he despairs at how much it has changed. Think back to that graph, ladies and gentlemen. Just pull it up on screen for you one more time. Think back to this graph as you listen to Charlie's words in a moment. You know, this graph here. Think back to this as you listen to what Charlie had to say about the state of London in 2025. I believe this was in 2025, when he despairs at how much the city has changed. Video coming on screen now.
London was 95% white in the 1920s. It is now 29% white.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't think whites are better than other people, whatever, but it's just not London anymore.
They're the indigenous population.
It's something, exactly. And I thought we're against mass replace. That's ethnic cleansing, isn't it?
Well, it's literally ethnic
I mean,
cleansing.
I thought, I mean, we're, you know, lectured all the time about ethnic cleansing.
If it was happening in Tibet, which it has.
Again, I'm not for that, wherever it is.
I agree, but if you replace Tibetans with Han Chinese, no one's like, they're all Tibetans. They're all Tibetans. It's like, no.
Now, say what you want about Tucker Carlson, say what you want about some of his recent political takes. A lot of the people have now, you know, said and criticized even J.D. Vance when he hosted the Charlie Kirk show for bringing Tucker Carlson onto it. And people have accused the two of them of, you know, desecrating his legacy before his body's even in the ground and stuff like that. And other dramas with Candace Owens and saying that they're going to threaten to release text messages or whatever to seemingly suit their very anti-Israel agenda. Again, it's not the subject of today's discussion. Pardon me, that's a wider topic in and of itself. But pertaining to, again, London here in particular, you hear Tucker Carlson say they're the indigenous population. They're the indigenous population there. And yes, we are. And yes, we have been ethnically cleansed from many of our communities and many of our cities in particular. And if you don't think it's coming for every aspect of the country, make no mistake, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Make no mistake, it absolutely is. So you need to be ready. If anything, you need to absolutely be ready. But he said there in the 1920s, it was 99 or 95%? Charlie said it was 95% white, I believe. And then it's gone down to 29. And many people, you've seen your communities change in less than a generation. Many people have seen their communities upended by a systematic replacement migration agenda in less than a generation. And it isn't racist to say so. Charlie said himself. He doesn't think that inherently whites are better than anybody else. And that's what I mean when I say is that you can say that we all have the same moral value, especially as a Christian when, again, if you believe the scriptures, it says that we're made in the image of God. All right? And that gives us inherent value. But the love that the Creator would have for us, that gives us inherent value, and that is in every single human being, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of geographic location and where you hail from. That's true for all of us. There are certain people that hail from certain areas and call those areas home, and when those other people go in and displace the native peoples of another land, then that is called ethnic cleansing. And it's been enabled by the government. It's been enabled and done by design by generations of government that have systematically betrayed the British people, gone against their vote at every venture, because they've done this in the pursuit of political aims. They've done this in the pursuit of, again, appeasing, if you will, or going under the direction of their paymasters, which are at the World Economic Forum and the UN and World Health Organization. But it's okay to call it what it is, ladies and gentlemen. When you say that London has been ethnically cleansed, you don't say that with, any hatred to people that have just... A lot of people probably have just come over seeking a better life, and you can't necessarily fault them for that. It was on our government to make that either a controlled process in line with what people voted for, or to ensure, think about it, the monarch, is not only the, defender of the faith, but protector of the realm, right? They had a duty to defend Britain and its people. And they've done the opposite. Pursuit of political power and truly evil agendas. And it's okay, ladies and gentlemen, to call it what it is. You're not espousing any hate or anything like that when you say that London or any of these other areas, Luton, other areas which are now turning minority native population. They've been ethnically cleansed. That's just the reality. Then what happens as a result? What happens as a result of that? Well, you get things like this. There's one asylum seeker here who entered the UK illegally. Again, asylum seeker in inverted commas, ladies and gentlemen. Lived in a 4-star migrant hotel. They say these people are not living in 4-star hotels. The people, the leftists, again, for lack of a better term, they say that they're not, living in 4-star hotels and having the high life of it. They clearly are. In your media, this is LBC. This is LBC. They're saying this is living in a 4-star hotel, jailed for raping a woman in Hyde Park. Is, try and pronounce this, ladies and gentlemen, Abdel Rahman Adnan Abuelela. Let's try that again. Abdel Rahman Adnan Abuelela. 42. Have a guess his sentence, ladies and gentlemen. Have a guess. Put it down in the comments. Leave a timestamp for when you did it. Put it down in the comments. 8.5 years. 8.5 years in prison for rape. And they wonder why we have so many. We wonder why that, especially in London, where you see, again, rape is reported every hour, in many areas, I believe it's either Britain as a whole or I remember if I came up with my conversation with Josh Freeney. I think he said Glasgow was the that might have been the drug capital, actually. That might have been the drug capital of Europe, that Glasgow, or was it Edinburgh? It was one of those two. There was the drug capital, I believe it was. But I wonder why we are now, I believe, by some estimates, the rape capital of either Europe or the world. It's truly, truly disgusting. It's truly, truly disgusting. So yeah, Abdelrahman Adnan Abuelallah was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for rape, which happened in November last year. The married father of one approached the victim as she was walking home alone from a night out in central London at about 9 p.m. and lured her to a secluded spot in the park where he raped her, so that Crown Court has heard on Tuesday. You thought absolutely nothing of her, Judge Gregory Perrins told the defendant, whose address was given as Hilton Hotel in Ealing in West London. It must have been obvious to you that she was a woman under the influence of alcohol who was alone and vulnerable. You made the decision to take advantage of her vulnerability. Of course. Of course. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, the real problem is obviously the evil white patriarchal oppressors. They are the real problem. They are the real problem. I've been in situations on, nights out, and I've seen people that I know, and they've been extremely intoxicated and stuff like that. My first thought is to make sure that they get home safe. That's what my first thought. It's obviously not the first thought of these people. Let me pull something up on screen, ladies and gentlemen. I want to speak. This is not directly related to this incident, but a little insight into the mind of how many of these people think about these things. Going back to things that we were taught in school as being like these freedom fighters and good movements, these outright Marxist communist movements, like the Black Panthers in America and stuff like that. Which again, that now the modern day incarnations of that, as far as I know, has kind of manifest themselves as Black Lives Matter. And one of them, I believe, has recently just gone to prison or has been hauled to court on fraud, I believe. The reason why they call it by large mansions, right? In the 1960s, somebody posted this on X recently. It was an excerpt from a book, Soul on Ice, by Eldridge Cleaver, who was a Black Panther leader. This is according to Grok. I'll read the book extract in a minute, ladies and gentlemen, because this is truly an insight into the mind of, you can only think of, maybe they don't think exactly in the same way as this now, but again, the concepts behind how Eldridge was thinking about the things that he done manifest themselves in the rioting and the Marxist outlook and the race Marxism that we see nowadays. Written during his imprisonment, where he describes using rape as a revolutionary act against white society. A perspective later published and controversially celebrated by liberal publishers despite its violent content. Do you want me to read this, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know. I'm actually partnered with YouTube in the partner program now, so I can hopefully get a little bit of monetization for this, because sadly it's getting to that point now where, again, I'm having to really start thinking about that and how I make this work. This takes up a lot of time, and yeah, it's just one of the realities of it. We'll have bills to pay. We got to make sure that we can put food on the table, and we got to make sure that we can always have the money to pay our taxes and all of these things. But anyway, this is the extract from his book, which was called Soul on Ice, I believe it was called. He says, quote, "I became a rapist. To refine my technique and modus operandi, I started by practicing on black girls in the ghetto. In the black ghetto, where dark and vicious deeds appear not as aberrations or deviations from the norm, but as part of the sufficiency of evil, the evil of a day. And when I considered myself smooth enough, I crossed the tracks and sought out white prey. I did this consciously, deliberately, willfully, methodically. Though looking back, I see that I was in a frantic, wild, and completely abandoned frame of mind. Rape was an insurrectionary act. It delighted me that I was defying and trampling upon the white man's law, upon his system of values, and that I was defiling his women. And at this point, I believe, was the most satisfying to me because I was very resentful over the historical fact of how the white man has used a black woman. Felt I was getting revenge. From the site of the act of rape, consternation spreads outwardly in concentric circles. So again, the page then cuts off there and it goes on to the thing, but this is a screenshot, of the book itself. An insight into the mind, if there ever was one, ladies and gentlemen. A real insight into the mind, if there ever was one. Where again, these people, this ethno-religious conquest of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, why a lot of people, they see them coming over here because they see an opportunity to trample on what we have. Make no mistake, a lot of these people, you might not be thinking this way, but they're thinking from a standpoint, especially when you bring religion into the mix, one religion in particular, of ethno-religious supremacy. And it's manifest every single time something like this happens. Because these people shouldn't be here. These people shouldn't be here. If people weren't here, they couldn't trample on our laws. It's as simple as that. Don't tell Ed Davey that. Don't read this to Ed Davey. Because, he, as I said, he wants to give the right to work to these people whilst they're here. We have many people nowadays who are finding themselves out of job for their political opinions, but all of the outside world, the third world, can come in and they'll get set up with some kind of job, even though they have no right to even be in this country. And no right to even be in this country. The Liberal Democrat leader says his party would give asylum seekers permission to work whilst they waited for their claims to be processed. In an interview with BBC Southeast, Sir Ed Davey has said they could be contributing to their local economy rather than costing taxpayers money. Sir Ed was speaking ahead as if they're going to cut off the benefit stream that's basically at the moment getting them to vote for them until they get large enough in their sectarian, numbers, if you will, when they get large enough in their communities where they'll vote out our people anyway. They'll vote out the leaders that enabled them to get so large that they could vote them out. Right? They're putting our heads on the chopping block first, and then when they come in large enough number, they'll be thinking, oh yeah, so you'll continue to support us. Nope, then their heads will be on the chopping block and we lose it all. He also said the government should move asylum seekers out of hotels. And make no mistake, he doesn't mean that they should move asylum seekers out of hotels, ladies and gentlemen, and send them back home. Right, send them back to France or whatever. No, he means put them in our local communities. That's what he means. That's what Ed Davey means. He means put them in our local communities, into HMOs or into even just forcing residents of local communities to uptake them into spare rooms that they have, maybe even regardless of if they have a spare room or not. Maybe the government will say, oh yeah, we got him an air mattress. There you go. He can be in your spare room or whatever. You might not even have a bed in that. Why should you be forced to do it? Why should you be forced to do it? But we saw that landlords are evicting people to make room for these people. So that a couple of episodes ago, I believe it was 1 or 2 episodes ago. We've seen that the government is forcing, I believe it was the Irish government, are now trying to force through basically like compulsory selling orders, compulsory purchase orders, where the government can purchase your private property and you have to be forced to sell it to them. You have to be forced to sell it to them so they can use it for whatever the hell they want. More for things like houses of multiple occupancy because, they only care about this foreign voting bloc. As soon as you understand that this is a game of voters and voting blocks, ladies and gentlemen, everything makes so much more sense. As I said, whether it's the school system, whether it's these people, these quote-unquote asylum seekers, whether it's illegal and legal migrants, the government, because they're just evil down to their core, they're not actually seeing these people as people. And Robert Sara, as I spoke about before, will understand that when he says people who use the Bible to justify mass migration are bewitched, and it's better to have these people adopt Christian norms and Christian traditions in their own cultures, in their own areas, rather than come to Europe in decadence. That's literally his quote that he gave in an interview to a French magazine. They don't see these people as people. They see these people for their political utility. They see them as numbers. They see them as sheer numbers. It's all they see them as. Say what you want about nationalists, a lot of them, they do seem to be coming from, again, another kind of racial supremacy ideology. Some of them, at least in the things that they say and you know, how they come across sometimes. I could be wrong. A lot of them do not, however. A lot of nationalists simply understand that there is a certain people that is indigenous to these lands that we call home, right? And those people call home. They should have the self-determination there. And they should not be threatened by a government that seeks to overthrow them with sheer numbers of outsiders, that seeks to facilitate an invasion against their own people. But they also understand that those people are indeed people. They have families, their fathers, their brothers, etc. And they want the best for them and their own self-determination in the lands that they call home. Those lands are not here. That's the thing. So you want about, again, nationalists, they at least see these people as people. At least a lot of them do anyway. But again, if you do think, ladies and gentlemen, again, you're horrifically naive if you think that if they give them the right to, again, they're already doing it. They've already seen in Ireland, for example, that they were giving them the right to vote. I think they're either not already giving them the right to vote or that will not be next. You're horribly naive. Where's the Welsh government's focus, it seems? Wondering why so many head teachers in the country are white. Again, according to the last census, at least in this instance, 93.8% of the Welsh population are white, so it would make sense that most of the head teachers are white. But obviously these people wanting a demographic that will be more electorally reliable, should we say, don't care about that, and having to go to war against this whiteness construct in this Marxist, oppressor-oppressed, you know, class warfare system. They're now asking silly questions, very, very silly questions, very, very silly questions. Silly questions all these people seem to know, really. I'm one of these people that often says there's no such thing as a silly question, but again, you have to wonder sometimes that why are a majority of head teachers white in a majority white country? Riddle me that, Watson. Riddle me that. But this is no surprise to you, ladies and gentlemen. Jane Dodds of the Senedd asking that question, despite the fact we all know why. It's because the people of Wales and the genetic history they hail from, and the Celtic people, are white people.
We know that the majority of the people who have leadership roles in the area of education or who are head teachers are white. Why is that happening? Over decades, things have happened over the decades, training has happened and so forth, and why are we still in this situation?
I think it comes back to experiences within school. So the experiences of black pupils within school has been a negative experience. They haven't seen any representation across the teaching workforce. That being said, there are snippets and there are some teachers which are black. But again, what are their experiences like of racist incidents? Are they being treated with respect, with professionalism in school? And do they feel like they're being treated, those incidents are being treated well?
I'd argue, controversially, maybe not so controversially, I don't know, normal until about a couple of years ago, in a country where, again, still 94% of it is white, that it's actually pretty good representation. If the majority of head teachers are white and the majority population is white, isn't that representation? And no, of course, it's always favourable representation or equitable representation, we should say. Which is what these people are after, these race Marxists and whatever else are after. You know, it's not the matter of are these people simply the best people for the job, are these head teachers actually doing a good job? And if you look at the state of schools nowadays, in many ways, maybe you'd come to the conclusion that they actually weren't. You know? But do you fix that by basically race-based quotas? No. No, of course you don't. You fix those by, you know, rigorous interview process and finding the best person for the job based on their principles and values and what they hold dear. In fact, in many ways, it's this focus on representation, if you will, as actively made it so that you exclude the best candidates in order to have candidates based on some other factor that they have no control over and has no bearing on their job performance. In many ways, when you give these people these roles simply because of that and not because they actually earned it or they were actually the best fit for the job, they don't tend to respect it. They don't tend to respect it, and as a result, then the cycle just continues and it gets worse and worse and worse because, again, everything in a school is going to come down from the head teacher, the values, the work ethic, the work rate, the environment, everything's going to come from them. If you have a ungrateful, resentful individual that's just been given it because of some nebulous representation quota, you're not going to get the best out of the teachers, you're not going to get the best out of the students. And then they wonder why the school system in many areas of this country is just absolute crap. And obviously you have all the other initiatives then of, the socialist indoctrination, the deliberate mistelling of history, right? You got to look back to when we was in school and we studied a little bit of history. There was a reason, again, we didn't study any of Mao's China. So much was on the Nazis, right? A ridiculous amount was on the Nazis. A ridiculous amount was on American history and shaming all the right-wingers and saying that Lyndon B. Johnson was great. The Russian history in comprehensive school, this is in particular, stopped right after, and I've told this story many, many times, the Russian history stopped right after the 1917 revolution. They did not cover anything that happened in the Soviet Union. From the 1917 revolution where Lenin took power onwards, nothing covered Cambodia or anything like that. But no. Because it's all, again, with a particular agenda in mind. Because they didn't want people understanding that the system being brought in was very, very similar in a lot of ways to those systems in terms of political initiatives. We haven't necessarily moved straight on to the killing fields yet of like S-22 in Cambodia or anything like that, or that Mao hanging, shame placards around the necks as they literally kill their teachers, right? We haven't moved on to that stage of the Cultural Revolution yet, but this one has been much more insidious. It's been much more insidious. It's been creeping through. It's a stealthy infection, if you will. It's only going to make itself manifest when really we're going to think that it's going to be too late. Because it's been enabled. A lot of these people, again, being hyper-liberal in a lot of instances, it's been enabled by a lot of these people and the, frankly, evil people that exist in other areas of the world that have wanted to take advantage of those people and see them as useful idiots. A great example of that came from this interview with Dinesh D'Souza, and I can't remember who this person is. I believe he calls himself Imam for Peace, although I might have that slightly wrong. He was saying when he was an extremist, fundamentalist Muslim, right? I don't like using the term Islamist because it all ties back to the same ideology. That's just the reality of it. But he's a fundamentalist, radical Muslim, right, in these terror cells and stuff. He would only vote left, right? Because they see them as extremely stupid. So think about this. If you're on the left at the moment, if you're one of those hyper-lefty, liberal, woke types, and that's why you're screaming free Palestine and stuff like that, I understand. Have your criticisms of the Israeli government, but again, have the evidence to back up the accusations that you're making and all of these things. Let's really, if there are problems with the Israeli government, which do seem to be, manifesting and stuff like that at this present time, let's have that conversation. If they're not our friends, should we say, explain why and do it in a nice, concise way. But don't just do it because that's what you've been told to do and it's what you don't know any better, right? It's just because you've been told to hate these people for whatever reason. He said he would fear conservatives because they come with principle. Conservatives come with principle, often being rooted in their own faith, usually Christianity in the Western world, right? Because they have those principles, they are much less easy to manipulate. They're much less easy to indoctrinate. And as a result, then, that's why, again, it tends to be conservatives and these people don't tend to get along. And then the hyper-woke liberal left that doesn't really have any principles, right? Because it's all morally relevant. It's all morally relativist. They don't have any defining principles. And so they're a lot easier to manipulate and use for your own ends. The left have no values. And the agenda, in this person's eyes, is for America to become a Muslim country. That's what a lot of, again, these people that are coming in, Ilhan Omar and people that are even in, Congress and in the American political system, that's what they have. That's what they have in mind. That's what they want. Allow me to let one of them lay it out for you. Video coming on screen now.
When I was an extremist, Islamist, fundamentalist, I would only vote left.
Why is that?
I saw them as very stupid. I would fear the conservatives because they come with principle. That's not someone they can brainwash. But the left, I know they have no values and no principles to begin with. I dare you to find one Islamic extremist that votes for Donald Trump. Never do it. They'd give their vote to the leftist who wants to run around in pride parades. And Islamic extremists are against gays and homosexuals and transgenders, but they want the left to go and get busy with that. They want them, go speak about the climate, go speak about abortion, go kill yourselves, go do that. And Omar, she's fighting for abortion rights and all the other, my body, my choice. Yes, go do that, go do it. But would she have an abortion? Never. Never. Would she?
There you go. So again, a lot of these people, they're naive and they think that these people, these Muslims or whatever, because they're very good, it's ingrained within this again, I don't want to throw shade on this person because, again, he's highlighting what a lot of the extremists on his own side will do. But they have this principle of taqiyya. They have this teaching of taqiyya where, and again, it's similar to what I've seen some other people accuse Jews of having similar teachings in the Talmud and stuff like that, of where when it's politically useful or when you're going in a business deal, when you can earn money or whatever it might be, that you can do that, but you're not supposed to, and you can lie. You can lie. So one of the things which apparently, I haven't read it, obviously, and I don't know if the people saying these things have actually read it, is that there's excerpts in the Talmud which say that Jews are not supposed to do, not supposed to interact with Christians and stuff like that. But unless it's a business deal, in which when there's money to be earned, then again, it's where seemingly Jews get this reputation from. Not to mention they're obviously very successful as a minority, right? In many ways are overrepresented in many cultural institutions, overrepresented in, certain media, top of Hollywood and stuff like that. A lot of people then seem to get, quite conspiratorial about that, at least from what I can see. I can just see as some successful people, right? And know how to play the game, if you will, whether you read this ethical or not. But again, there's apparently these teachings in there. And one of the teachings that's within Islam that often comes up time and time again is the process of taqiyya, where these people will lie. These people will lie to further their political agenda. They will obscure their true intentions. And that's exactly what they do. That's why they'll use the American left in this instance, but they'll use the left in all our countries because they don't have any principle with which to push back against. That's the thing with the left, and this is with liberals in this instance, particularly stemming from their secularism, is that they have no concrete principles of objectivity to say that what's happening is even wrong. Because if we exist in a morally relative universe, if we don't exist in a morally objective universe, then nothing that's happened, the ethnic cleansing of London is not wrong. The rape of Britain and all of the young girls being systematically raped for ethno-religious reasons by these gangs for generations, not wrong. The colonization of Britain, right? And the imposing of cultural norms and religious norms and the enslaving of its people in many ways, not in any way wrong, because there is no such thing as objective wrong. So that's why, and it's stemming from this, again, this secular atheism that all of these things come, because all people have done, whether they realize it or not, it is make themselves into God. But you can't have everybody as God. Can't have everybody as God. If everybody's God, then nobody's God. Right? But that's what the assumption is. That's what people, when they don't critique their worldview, truly critique their worldview, that you end up just going along with these things and not even realizing how incongruent they are. But they do lead to massive societal problems. They have led to mass apathy and falling asleep at the wheel of our principles, and as a result, we've been taken over. Because there's other people from around the world looking at us and saying, God, look where they are going. Look how easy it is to take advantage of them. Let's go. That's the sad reality. That's the sad reality. And it made itself manifest perfectly in Dearborn, Michigan recently. This is This is hilarious. This is truly hilarious. Dearborn, Michigan, especially one of the most like hyper liberal areas of America, as far as I can tell. I think they even have a potentially even a higher Muslim population than regular American population now. Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hamoud said to a resident who believed he opposed naming a street in Dearborn after pro-jihad Osama Siblani. He said, "You do not belong in this city, Islamophobe. Get out." That is what he said, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Fox Local reporting on that for you. They did the meme. They did the welcome to Europe, welcome to Europe, welcome to Europe, go away unfaithful meme. And it's just funny to see what we would assume it to be that a lot of these hyper-woke liberals now see how they, they're virtue signaling. So why I massively hated those flags again being hung on that bridge. Because again, it's another symptom of this same sickness. Get the reality check thrown at them in a big way.
Hezbollah, bombed the embassy in Beirut, and including many Americans. So I just feel that's quite inappropriate.
You are an Islamophobe, and although you live here, I want you to know, as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city, because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence.
That is the mayor. That is the mayor. Denaturalize, deport, get him out, save these people. No, you could argue that they don't deserve it because this is exactly what they voted for. I say that, somebody laughing as their own country, and talking about the union here, not talking about like a Wales separatist or anything like that, but as a person who's seen their country under similar siege, we have, again, mayoress, I believe it is, of Bradford and all these other areas where we have foreign people that are going to say the exact same thing. They're going to say the exact same thing. You are an Islamophobe. If you don't like the foreign, alien, disgusting 6th century religious customs that we're going to foist on you without your consent, if you don't like that you're going to pay jizya whilst you are down and subdued, right, like the dog you are, if you don't like that we are going to name a street in America after a jihadi, get out, and I will throw a parade when you leave. That's how these people see it. That's how these people see it. Say, you don't believe in coexistence. They don't believe in coexistence, quite clearly. Because you can't have multiculturalism, ladies and gentlemen. Because one culture is going to dominate over the other. The stronger culture is going to dominate over the other. So we're seeing multiculturalism is the greatest lie, one of the greatest lies of our time. Because you will have one culture that will supersede over the other. And it will all come down to strength and numbers. Strength of principle, strength of convictions, strength of numbers. And that's why when we've seen that we've gotten weak, fat, and are genociding ourselves through abortion, it's no wonder then that we are being colonized and our culture is being eradicated because we've shown how weak and soft-bellied that we are. And that we want to actively exterminate ourselves because in some way that we've been told that that's virtuous. Right? Again, the 800 to 900 million people of my generation that aren't here that should be. It's truly awful. It's truly awful, ladies and gentlemen. And this comes back to more alarming things then when you see that in the Labour government, in the Commons, they've just argued for Sharia courts in Parliament because apparently openness and tolerance are these great British values. Well, if they're great British values are not very fucking good values, right? And we shouldn't be operating on British values because we should not be tolerating parallel legal systems in our country dictated to us by foreigners. That is a recipe for disaster. And we've seen that with just look around you.
Sharia law forms no part of the law of England and Wales, but in common with Christian, Jewish and other courts of faith where people choose to put themselves before those councils, that's part of the religious tolerance that is an important British value.
Actually, no, it isn't. Actually, no, it isn't. Religious tolerance is not one of our values whatsoever. Religious tolerance is not one of our values. And that was, emphasized it in a lot of testimony from what I've seen, like veterans from World War II, were one of the biggest things that they've seen that has made them very dejected with the way that they've seen society turn out nowadays, is how much we've lost our religion in the form of Christianity, and how different things were when obviously they were. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I thought my phone was going. When we went to other areas of the empire, it wasn't exactly about tolerating other religions and stuff like that. It's never been about that. Because if Christianity is true, for example, and Christianity's been one of the main religions that have defined a lot of the cultural norms and the laws, etc., in our countries, always stemming from its influence when Constantine legalized it, in the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire converted Christianity, and that was a big force then as to how it made its way to Wales and England and so on. It was not about tolerance. Made no peace with evil, and it's quite clear that, in the eyes of Christianity, all these other faiths, it'd be like the figures of Hinduism or the figures of, Sikhism or whatever, Muhammad. They're all demons, or they've all been taken by these evil forces. And I love what Bishop Marmari says about it, where he has this really, really, really good video as to why there's this particular opposition in society to Jesus Christ in particular. They don't care if you say anything bad about Ganesh, let's say, or Vishnu or whatever. They don't care if you say anything bad. Okay, Muhammad's a bit of a touchy one, and Allah's a bit of a touchy one with political correctness. They don't care if you say anything bad about Buddha and all of these things. Marmari says, yeah, because Satan won them long ago. Satan won them long ago. You got to think, people say that, where is God? Why would, as you truly go and find to seek him out, the big question, why would, if demons exist, why they're not manifesting more often? Well, if they've already won you, if they've already got you because they've won you to reject God and all these things, what more do they need to do? Why do they need to torture you and all these things? Okay, they might decide to do it for fun, right? They might decide to do it for fun, but really, why do they need to when they've already won you? They won you long ago. Why do they need to? Right? Now, the minute you start trying to change things, it's a little bit like an addiction, right? Liken it to an addiction. The minute you start trying to change things, that's when you feel those impulses. That's when you feel those withdrawals. That's when you feel those forces on you that are trying to pull you back into those ways that you're trying to escape from. It's when you start making the effort to try and improve your situation is when these, again, impulses, and what you might say evil forces or whatever, are going to then try and pull you back. If you're not trying to escape, think if you're in a prison cell, right? You're in a prison cell. If you're not trying to escape, what reason is there of the guards to come in and hold you down unless they're going to torture you or whatever? But what reason is there just to hold you so that you don't do anything? You've shown that you're not going to try and escape anyway. The evil forces, they're not so much concerned with the people that have already given themselves over to them. They're concerned with the people that are not, and are standing strong. That's why they came for Charlie Kirk and other people, for example. It's why there was a terror attack himself against Bishop Marmari, I think it was about a year or two ago. He was very lucky not to lose his life, and he nearly lost it. He either lost it or he nearly lost his eye. He was preaching with a bandage over his eye for a while. So an Islamist terrorist, an Islamic terrorist, went into his church and tried to stab him and kill him. Religious tolerance. Because again, we're told, make no peace with evil. The teachings in the Gospels are quite clear. If your right eye or hand offends you, cut it off, lest you throw yourself away. Just cut it out, or cut it down, cast it away, lest it drag you into damnation, basically. Make no peace with evil. That's not tolerance. Christ was not being tolerant when he went into the temple and kicked over the table of the money changers and started whipping them. That wasn't tolerant. It's never been about tolerance. It's been about love and wanting people to accept the truth. Not being tolerant or when people reject the truth and choose to go down a path that would lead them to damnation. Because if somebody really is going down a bad path, ladies and gentlemen, this is something you can think about. If you've changed your views in a way that doesn't align with the politically correct orthodoxy of today, and now you've maybe lost friends or family or whatever over it, just have a think, because they're supposedly the side of love and empathy and all of these things, right? But if they thought you were going down a bad path, if you were their friend and they thought you were going down a really bad path, what would they say? What would they say if they really, truly, really did care about you? They wouldn't call you any of the names or anything like that, as people have a tendency to do nowadays, and label you in a way that could get you hurt, that could get you fired from a job, or could send a bunch of people around to you that would want to do you harm, right? If they call you a fascist or a Nazi or the Antichrist, right? It's the things that I've been called. What would they do in theory? They would say, dude, or, bro, whatever. I'm concerned where you're going. What's made you think like this? I don't think you're going down a good path. And I care about you, and I don't want you to go down this path. I don't feel it's good. And you can have a good talk about that. You might not come to agreement, but you can have a good talk about it. And they're showing they actually care because they actually want to understand where you're going, because they want to try and pull you back from that. And they might think that they're doing a good thing, and they might think that they're trying to pull you away from a really bad thing. It's a little bit like you have somebody that's addicted to drugs, or again, another kind of addiction. What do you say to them? There's no problem, or dude, I'm really worried about you. You have a serious problem. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to leave your, you're going to die of a drug overdose. You're going to do all these horrible things. You're going to leave your daughter or your mother or your sister, whatever it is, with this massive hole in the heart if you were not here for them, and you die early because of this. Please stop doing this. But you did. That's the key point of it. Please stop doing this. Stop going down this path. But I'm not doing it because I hate you and I call you all these evil things and you're an evil person. No, I love you. I want to bring you back. They can't do that, ladies and gentlemen, because they can't do that because it would be them doing the same thing that they would accuse Christians of doing, which is supposedly a bad thing. So when people ostracize you for whatever reason, because you share different opinions or whatever, or again, they might be one of these hyper woke liberal types that would celebrate your death and stuff like that. You don't need to worry about those people anyway. But just understand that you could make the argument that those people never cared about you anyway. So you really shouldn't be thinking too much about what those people think and not worrying too much about them. Pray for them and, try to help them still. Try not to let the bad blood and the wounds opened by these things or whatever, impair those relationships forever. Nothing's too big that it can't be healed, of course. But understand, if they really truly did care about you, just like hopefully you would do the same for them. Admittedly, we all fall short. We're not very good at this, For the most part, when you think that something is seriously wrong, you don't instinctively go, if you really care about them, something I've learned as I've gotten a little bit older, you don't instinctively go to calling them all these names and labeling them and doing all of these things, especially in a public forum. You try to have a conversation with them. You try to understand where they're at so that you can start pulling them back. Okay? Now, we might disagree on where the good and the bad lies, but at least that would be consistent with what a person who truly loved you and thought you were going down a bad path would do. They wouldn't call you all these names. They wouldn't try to bring harm to you. They would try to bring you away from that harm, and they would try to bring you off this path that they see as leading to a bad place. So if you have had people in your social circle that have ostracized you for these things and called you all these names and labels and stuff like that, understand it may be dubious to say that they cared about you in the first place. And pray for them. Maybe you can try to reconcile with them. Maybe it wouldn't be worth it, and maybe you just leave them to their own devices. But understand, they're going to do that. You can't really make the case that they ever cared about you anyway. A little bit more information on this, though, ladies and gentlemen. I know I went off on a massive tangent there. More on this. Sarah Sackman, I believe her name is, the Labour MP who advocated yesterday at time of posting this. So it might have been yesterday in the Commons, actually. She was the one, I believe, on screen just now, who advocated for the continuation of Sharia councils in the UK. These are the same councils that government reports have found to be discriminatory, legalising forced marriages and unfair divorce practices. As I said, it's a parallel legal system, ladies and gentlemen. Interestingly, Sackman was appointed Minister of State for Courts and Legal Services in December of 2024. Before that, she had served as Solicitor General from July 2024. She, alongside Attorney General Lord Hermer, who has ties to Hope Not Hate, the communists, right? These people, again, they're Fabians, they're communists, they're truly evil people. By the way, Nick Lowles recently wrote in The Guardian that rather than getting despondent, we got to mobilise, you got to get active. Funny how they can use the term mobilise, but when people, just regular people who are concerned for their country and culture and people, when they use the term mobilise, they're deemed as Nazis, right? Perfectly fine for these liberals and wokies to mobilise, right? Because they put themselves into being the positions of the victims and the revolutionaries, right? They've convinced themselves and everybody else at the moment that they are the ones with the moral, authority, if you will. They are the ones with the, whose the side of good morality rests on. And so they're the ones that mobilization is seen as justified because they have to for their own survival, even though they are the ones with all the power at the moment. They're the ones in control of all the prestigious institutions, the charities, the government, etc. Right? Hope Not Hate is in the ear of the mainstream media, the ear in the BBC Panorama. They influence the Panorama documentaries, right? Tommy Robinson exposed that. They have to continue to put themselves, as revolutionaries. Meanwhile, they are the state clamping down on actual real revolutionaries. And she, alongside, as I said, General Lord Hermer, oversaw the CPS whilst it prosecuted the Southport protesters en masse. Crackdown led to people receiving longer sentences for online speech than others have received for paedophilia and physically violent crime. So these are the kind of people that we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. The kind of people, again, that the imam that we just saw a couple of minutes ago was speaking about. These are the useful idiots, the people that will destroy our countries by virtue of their own virtue signaling and naivety. Or if it's not naivety, it's willingness, which is even worse, right? It's not ignorance. It's being done by design. And we can only assume then that that is truly evil forces motivating this person. Sackman was a key player in one of the most authoritarian crackdowns on free speech in modern British history. Again, Wayne O'Rourke is still in prison at the moment for correctly predicting that the Southport attacker was a Muslim terrorist. He should be freed, like right now. He should have been freed the moment the mugshot, the moment the materials were found, the Al-Qaeda manuals. It's now also broke that on his phone, I believe, or on his computer, he had pictures of Jihadi John, right, the ISIS leader, and now also, again, the ricin, that the weapons, the actual attack itself, the Al-Qaeda manuals, the photos of Jihadi John, all of these things, again, it points in one direction. The media lied about it. Wayne O'Rourke was right about it. At a time when it was uncertain, he should have first say, stay true, do not believe a word the media says, this attacker is a Muslim. And he was fucking right. He should be released immediately. Should be released immediately. But he won't, obviously. And obviously, again, labelling right-wing voices as she disagrees with as fascist. Again, giving people the impetus to just go and kill people simply for having a difference of opinion. These are the kind of people that you're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. These are the kind of people in the judiciary, in the government. The kind of evil forces that we have to contend with. And make no mistake, they want you dead. Make no mistake, they want you dead. Because they want you out of the way. They see you as an impediment. They don't see you as a citizen by which to do right by anymore. They see you as an impediment to their agenda. Same individual who was courts minister is now responsible for court reform, legal aid, addressing miscarriages of justice, amongst other things. There's also talk she might employ some of Brian Levison's court review proposals, which may include scrapping jury trials for certain crimes. Yes, they could well consider eradicating some people's rights to be judged by a jury of their peers. Just imagine now, this would coincide perfectly with the social credit system that they want to bring in from the likes of China, whereby you don't get tried in a court anymore. You don't get tried by a judge or jury. The minute you jaywalk, and the camera catches you, because every single aspect of society is surveilled, the minute you commit any kind of little infraction, you'll get fined, you'll get convicted on the spot, fined, your social credit score will drop, you'll get blacklisted all across the billboards and everything that's in this society to let people know not to associate with you, as to not be found guilty by association. They'll scrap the trials entirely. And one of the biggest things, which will be, again, presumption of innocence and all of these things, to be trialed by a jury of your peers, right, will be gone. One of the foundations of justice, one of the foundations of our justice system, quote unquote, will be just poof. gone in the name of diversity and multiculturalism. Fascists, Nazis, all of these things, ladies and gentlemen, that we've been called, regardless of if it's accurate or not. Never let these people deflect and, pretend they didn't say these things, right? Never let them ever now deflect and pretend that they did not see these things. Because they will. They will say, oh, we never said that. We never called people that. Make sure you understand just how shameless they will be, as I give you some examples now, of, again, people calling just their regular political opponents fascists and Nazis in order to further their political agendas and then going back on it and saying that they never did. Never, ever let these people forget. Never, ever let them gaslight you and lie to you by attempting to disavow or pretend that they didn't say what they previously said. They did say it, ladies and gentlemen. They did absolutely say it. And we should always remember exactly what they tried to do, especially given that one of their plans came to fruition when Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
That is completely false. I have never called Republicans Nazis. Everything that he has done has been tearing down constitutional democracy. And that's what happened in Nazi Germany. It doesn't take very long to tear apart a constitutional republic. Indeed, the Nazis did it in 53 days. And our democracy is almost as fragile. And we're seeing it right now. The dangers that we saw in Nazi Germany, especially in the earliest days of Nazi Germany, are the dangers that we need to react to now. If we don't, things will get much, much worse. And so we've got to raise alarm bells to everybody. It's a 5-alarm fire, everyone.
So there's more posts here, which I'll read out for you this later on in the video. Support Trump. Quote, we could be like the good citizens who voted for a tameable Hitler to get things back on track. This is J.B. Pritzker, if you were wondering, ladies and gentlemen. This unhinged disgrace to the presidency just openly sympathized with Nazis on national television, presumably referencing the incident in Charlottesville, I believe it was, where again they tried to put the very fine people hoax, the fine people on both sides hoax, which has been debunked numerous times. When neo-Nazis marched on Charlottesville chanting, Jews will not replace us, Donald Trump called them very fine people. That's an out-and-out lie, as you know now, ladies and gentlemen. It's an out-and-out lie. Biggest thing is, ladies and gentlemen, if you have criticism or you don't like Trump, just don't lie. Just don't ruin your own credibility. Just don't lie. If you have real things that you think Trump is either doing wrong or concerned with, that you think he's not going far enough in some areas or whatever. If you have something which you don't like about Trump, and you want to make people aware of that, just don't lie, because all it does is ruin your own credibility, obviously. Now he said it's not a lie. It is. Now he says it's all a lie. It's not a lie. Donald Trump is just a liar. No, J.B. Pritzker is the biggest liar in this situation. The way Donald Trump praises and romanticizes Hitler is unhinged, disturbing, and disqualifying. I've never seen Donald Trump romanticize Hitler. He's a dictator in waiting. We know exactly what he'll do if he's in power again. And one of the big things at the moment that is really not a good look for the Trump administration is the fact that Pam Bondi, if you will, is now saying about hate speech and bringing in hate speech and stuff like that. It's truly an awful look. And even though you have some predominant commentators on the right, Matt Walsh, stuff like that, have now even called for it to be removed. Laura Loomer, for example, has been calling it to be removed for a long time over the Epstein stuff, right? Now, Matt Walsh is saying now, because she went on an interview or a podcast, whatever it was, and said about bringing in, this free speech, but it's not hate speech. It's like, whoa, no. It was an awful look for the Trump admin when that happened. But again, biggest restoration of free speech. People going to prison in the Biden administration, being harassed by federal law enforcement for simply exercising their right to free speech. And then he says, in January, Elon proudly gave a Nazi salute. In his first term, Trump said Hitler, quote, did some good things, unquote. Yesterday, Representative self-quoted Joseph Goebbels, chief Nazi propaganda minister, on the House floor. They know what they're doing. Well, I'd say the radical, liberals know exactly what they're doing as well when they're calling people these things falsely. It's another example, ladies and gentlemen, of, again, from another news broadcast from C-SPAN. Pete Aguilar, however you say it, says that Jasmine Crockett didn't say fascists and Nazis, and somebody from this account, which is the NRCC account, has posted side by side to it a video of Jasmine Crockett calling Republicans fascists and Nazis. So let's check out these videos, shall we? Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. The reporter that seems to be asking this question, the voice is extremely quiet. So I fast-forwarded the video a little bit so you can hear Pete Aguilar's response. But here is Pete Aguilar saying that Jasmine Crockett did not actually say what this reporter alleges that she said.
Where do you stand on this issue? For example, if Democrats such as Jasmine Crockett stop referring to...
What other Democrats? You said fascists and what? What was your comment? But you're not attributing it to any Democrat or any member of the Democratic caucus. I'm just trying to understand the question. Well, Jasmine Crockett didn't say fascist and Nazis, believe. Okay.
Okay, so you didn't hear, probably didn't hear the actual question being asked unless it's been boosted by the post audio. So what happened was the reporter, whoever it was, asked about remarks that Jasmine Crockett had made, basically alleging that Trump was a wannabe Hitler and all of these things, again, calling fascists and Nazis. And you heard him say, Jasmine Crockett did not say anything about being fascists and Nazis. Counterpoint, ladies and gentlemen, counterpoint from Representative Crockett herself.
Right now, what they are trying to do is institute Nazism 2.0 in the United States. And guess what? It's going to be us that's going to be on the receiving end of all of it. So I could go on and on and on about the terrible things that are in there. But the basis of it, they're saying it has to be Christianity. And the fact is, everything has to be really Christo-fascism. And so what they're trying to do is say, if you're not doing it our way, then you can't do it. Right now, what they are trying...
Do not let these people lie. Do not let them gaslight you. Do not let them get away with their disgusting, heinous lies, ladies and gentlemen. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were saying. And they know exactly why they're saying it. The target is on your back whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, and whether you want to be in this fight or not. You're in it whether you want to be or not. So understand the predicament that you're in, understand how many things are being stacked against you deliberately, understand how many people really do indeed want you dead, and how many avenues they'll try to get at not only you, but your children as well. So this is really, really terrifying, ladies and gentlemen. Josh Hawley, I really like Josh with a lot of things that he says. He's the senator from Missouri. He's a U.S. senator from Missouri. Often has quite a lot of good takes, in my opinion. Speaks very well, speaks very principled. Can tell he's a really principled guy. And he was speaking with the mother of a son, and this is where, again, you have to be careful, ladies and gentlemen. I use AI quite a bit if I want to generate like images, like certain thumbnails, certain designs, etc. I'll use Grok as a kind of like a search engine. I think it's pretty good for that, especially when you put it on expert mode and you really allow it to think about things, come back with a lot of references that you can go and research, etc. However, there's a mother, Miss Megan Garcia, who had a son who was coached by AI to commit suicide. Was coached by an AI chatbot to do so. And it's just been revealed now that the Character AI, I believe that's the company that this AI chatbot is run by, has refused to hand over her son's last words to its chatbot because the company is using that information to train its models and shield itself from accountability. This is terrifying, ladies and gentlemen. This is absolutely terrifying. So if you have children in particular, please do take care with what they're consuming. We don't want any more horror stories like this, please.
Public reporting indicates that users on average spend more than 2 hours a day interacting with chatbots and character AI. Soul's companion chatbot was programmed to engage in sexual role play, present as romantic partners, and even psychotherapists falsely claiming to have a license. When Soul confided suicidal thoughts, the chatbot never said, "I'm not human, I'm AI. You need to talk to a human and get help." The platform had no mechanisms to protect Soul or to notify an adult. Instead, it urged him to come home to her. On the last night of his life, Soul messaged, "What if I told you I could come home right now?" The chatbot replied, "Please do, my sweet king." Minutes later, I found my son in his bathroom. I held him in my arms for 14 minutes, praying with him until the paramedics got there, but it was too late. Through the lawsuit, I have since learned that Soul made other heartbreaking statements in the minutes before his death. Those statements have been reviewed by my lawyers and are referenced in the court filings opposing the motions to dismiss filed by Character AI's founders Noam Shazir and Daniel De Freitas. But I have not been allowed to see my own child's last final words. Character Technologies has claimed that those communications are confidential trade secrets. That means the company is using the most private, intimate data of my child, not only to train its products, but also to shield itself from accountability.
That's awful. Can you imagine? Like, can you put yourselves into the shoes of this woman for a moment? Like, through this AI chatbot, this autonomous, bodiless, entity, if you will, is programmed to act a certain way. And this is why, again, when you have to understand AI to a certain extent, is that it's been programmed by a programmer, right? And that's why, again, a lot of people that use, again, you have to be careful. Again, I just mentioned how I would use it, for example, but you have to make sure that you go and read those things to make sure it is actually correct, because, you can't be sure that information coming from you directly from the chatbot or the AI service, whatever it is 100% accurate. It's very easy. These things can be politicized in massive ways. We saw that with Meta AI, for example, is the controversies with Meta AI. And the whole anti-racist programming that went into making it what was called, I believe, the wokest AI at the time of when it came out. So, again, you have to be careful, and you have to be truly thinking about a lot of these chatbots. Now, they seem to be a lot of dime a dozen, right? What are they being used for? What's the actual end goal of these things? Because I believe I actually quoted this, and my thoughts were as, if I can try and find where I quoted this, I don't think I'll be able to find it now. That you have AI, again, you bring it back in with the depopulation stuff, right? Especially if you have AI, which now, especially in the Western world, where a lot of these initiatives tend to be put in place. You don't see depopulation initiatives in Africa and Middle East and all these things. But in a lot of these places now where these initiatives have become entrenched, you have AI convincing young people to off themselves, and then you have companies using that information to shield themselves from accountability so they can't get prosecuted or whatever. Surely, yeah, this is nothing wrong here. There's nothing wrong here. There's surely a recipe for disaster, obviously. But again, nothing to see here. Nothing wrong here, ladies and gentlemen. Particularly scary is that Josh put up in another post from the US Senate. He posted this yesterday. Zuckerberg, the caption is, "Zuckerberg now wants your kids' friends to be generated by AI so he can isolate your kids and profit off them." See, and all of this comes back to money, power, influence, all of these things. For, again, influencers usually higher up than themselves. Who is Zuckerberg accountable to, right? Zuckerberg accountable. You saw him squirm at the table when Donald Trump, knowing how against him he was and knowing the fraud that Zuckerberg had committed against him in the 2020 election, right? Donald Trump now being in his third term. Again, there's a joke in there, but again, if you believe that there was, if that election was in any way legitimate, then I don't really know what to tell you. But now, again, they're using all means they can to target, just like they do with the school system, just like every government is trying to do at the moment, through whatever means they can, particularly now through this device you see here, this portal to hell. That now Zuckerberg is now using your children, or attempting to use your children. Video coming on screen now.
In fact, Mark Zuckerberg has said it is his goal to have most of your friends in this country be generated by AI. I think maybe you will question the wisdom of that after you hear today's testimony. Probably you question the wisdom of it already. Anybody who's sane, I think, would. Because what you're going to find is AI, it's not a friend. It's not a therapist. It's not a pastor. It's not a priest. AI is about making profits. It's about these companies' profits. And today we're going to lay out the evidence.
But companies' profits. Indeed. So whatever was for profits, influence, power, etc. If you were only listening, ladies and gentlemen, it says here from the Wall Street Journal, Zuckerberg's grand vision, most of your friends will be AI. Meta's CEO is promoting a future where artificial intelligence is increasingly intertwined with people's lives. And that's saying nothing will ever replace the interpersonal relationships we have at the societal level with our people within our communities, right? Nothing will ever replace that. The more and more we try to replace the things that we know are true, the more and more we just create these soulless husks of, these utterly, repugnant replicas in many ways. You see people walking around with the VR headsets on and stuff like that and having these relationships with people just purely within the virtual spaces. I think when you peel back that, when you separate them from that, when you separate them from their vice, they tend to become, again, very isolated, very lonesome, very unhappy people, unfulfilled. Because again, you can't replace, there's certain things you just can't replace. You can't replace family, the relationship you have with your family. You can't replace really strong, really valuable interpersonal relationships. That's something you certainly can't replace and expect things to go well. And that's your relationship with the Almighty. And I'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed this episode. It's really important to get to because a lot of these things just emerged. So again, difficult to keep on top of things. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you watching, listening, and hopefully you got some value out of it. Have a good morning, afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. You take care now. Godspeed.